Welcome to the Build Exact webinar on insights, efficiencies, and disruptions to the supply chain. Thank you so much for joining us today. Steve Yates, our Executive Vice President at Build Exact, will be kicking us off, and I'll hand it over to him. And when you have questions, please send them through to the chat and we'll answer them as we receive them. So please, anytime, send your questions in through the chat. Thanks, Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Well, and also I should say thank you, Craig. It's always a tremendous pleasure to get time with you. We've been having these types of conversations for many years now, and it's always a pleasure. And also, want to thank the listeners, the people attending the webinar. You know, we all live in busy worlds, and we really appreciate the time people are taking to hear from Craig about what's going on in the supply chain right now. Of course, it's an honor for us to have Craig with us, and it's worth pausing for a minute and thinking about why we're so keen to talk to Craig about what's going on. Well, Build Exact, as most of you now know, is a SaaS software product. It's a collaborative tool for custom builders, custom home builders, their homeowners, and dealers and their manufacturers to collaborate together. And our goal in life, our mission, is to make the construction supply industry as simple as possible, which is no small mission, given the conversation we're about to have today. And of course, the advantage of collaborating, certainly from a dealer point of view, is that by establishing a collaborative relationship with both your suppliers and with your builders, you can create a lot of efficiency in your organization. And in addition to efficiency, that collaborative relationship builds stickiness and loyalty. And most importantly of it all, it provides you a great deal more visibility than you otherwise would have if you were in kind of standoff, low trust transactional relationships. And so it's kind of within that umbrella that we're delighted to invite Craig in. And Craig is also deserving of some congratulations right now. Just hot off the presses, the C-150 report. Congratulations, Craig.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
I had an advanced look at it. It's absolutely fantastic. It's like Mark II, a really, really big step up from last year, and really exciting and relevant information in there. So congratulations.
25% bigger and better, and thanks to Build Exact for your support to help make it possible.
Yeah, well, information is power, right? And so tell me, speaking about that, just as a warm-up question, what was the big surprise out of the research findings this year?
Two things came to mind. The first was a really pleasant surprise, which was that when you sell lumber, you could make a lot of money. The percentages of revenue increase for building material dealers who were lumber centric was just enormous. And, you know, I knew it was going to have an impact, but, you know, 40, 50, 60%. So I'm talking to a person like Walter Foxworth of Foxworth Galbraith, who dates back to his first year at business was 1969, you know, so he knows about these things, and he's never seen a year like this. So it's kind of fun to be in an unprecedented year. But there's also sort of a frightening notion about this too. And that is that when you start looking at the costs and whether people really actually made money on the bottom line as opposed to the top line, I think that's a little less certain. The results, for example, were that if you didn't grow like by adding or acquiring somebody, your personnel costs still went up something like 19% since COVID arrived. And some of that is commissions, but some of it's permanent. And so, you know, if we get back down to $400 lumber or $500 lumber, are those people, like Warren Buffett said, the naked people, when the tide goes out, that's when you discover who the naked people were in the water. We may have that sort of thing happen. And so I am concerned about that. The ability to know, just because you've got more dollars coming in, does that mean you have more sticks going out, is another thing. And being able to measure that with technology is something that has only recently come along, and I'm sure as heck hoping people are following that metric.
Well, and that, of course, I think you framed the issue really well, right? Revenue is one thing, profit is another. We're going to talk a lot about that today. But before we do, I think as valuable as it is to know what happened, which is what the C150 report is telling us, it's also important to know what's going to happen. Do you have a view based on the report, look ahead 12, 18 months into the supply chain? Are we dealing with similar issues? Are they divergent? Are there other challenges that we should be focusing on or looking at?
Right. Dorothy Parker, who was one of the famous quipsters of the round table in New York, used to wake up in the morning and say, "What fresh hell is this?" And that was sort of her view of life. And in some ways, I think for a lot of dealers, these past 2 years, it's been a case of what fresh hell is this? And unfortunately, the hells that we've been having in terms of the supply chain and prices are going to continue for the rest of this year. I just was listening to and watching some presentations from public companies when they were giving their earnings reports in the last few weeks. Maybe a slight moderation in some things. Things are, going to get a little less bad, but for the most part, we're going to see a lot of continued price shocks, price increases, and the windows and doors are going to be hard to have and hard to get for quite a while to come. Now, that's what's happening on the outside. We also have the economy that people are worrying about. One thing I would just bring up, even as recently as this morning, at David Flitman's presentation for the first quarter earnings of Builders FirstSource, he said, we talked to thousands of builders around the country, and while there are concerns, we're really not seeing an enormous slowdown in what's going on. Yes, there are concerns about the interest rates, the mortgage rates, excuse me, but demand is still strong. The millennials are still having babies. The credit quality is still better than it was in 2006 and 2008. So, maybe the metaphor we should be using is that people are taking their foot off the gas or lessening up on the gas pedal a little bit, but they're not, he doesn't think builders are putting the brakes on. Mm-hmm. So consequently, you can expect challenges, I think, as a dealer and steady business as a dealer, at least through the end of this year and going into next year. Now, there are some technological factors that I could bring up now too, but I'll just stop it there right now.
Yeah, and I think customer segmentation matters a lot here too, right? Because you identified the demographics, the millennial population. I think that is all very true. What are we, north of 1.7 million housing starts projected this year? I think all that is true. And then someone could bring in an economic conversation around interest rates and that affects housing mobility, and that goes to the benefit of the remodeling industry, right? So
absolutely,
a lot of how you will look at this will depend on your segmentation. Custom home builders, remodelers versus production builders, and so you would have a different response in a different market outlook depending on that segmentation. Yes.
I agree. One of the things that the Construction Supply 150 pointed out is that while lumber yards tended to have growth of 50 or 60%, the big boxes only went up about 9 or 10%. The specialty stores, the roofing and the others, went up in the 20s. So it really did vary based on customers. Now, in terms of where we're going in the future, yes, the remodeling industry still looks to be strong, and it's more the do-it-for-me type work as opposed to the do-it-yourself work. And those things tend to be good. I mean, yeah, a few people build decks on their own, but most people hire people to build the decks for them. And so, you know, we're seeing things in that way, just as we were before.
You touched on it briefly, but let's talk about pricing. You know, a friend of mine would say, you know, with good planning, you can make money in an up cycle and you can make money in a down cycle, but it's really difficult to make money in a market that's up and down and up and down.
Absolutely. Planning ahead and being able to manage those things are important. You know, Builders First Source, once again, just to use as an example from their presentation this morning, was talking about how they had, depending on whether you have $500 lumber or $1,000 lumber, you know, it's going to make a dramatic increase in their revenues. But they also said, you know, it doesn't stay that way forever. One of the reasons why the numbers are very, very good for a lot of these public companies in the first quarter was that lumber last year did not peak until April. Lumber this year shot up in January and February. And so as a result, according to Random Lengths, the price for lumber this year was 23% higher in the first quarter on their composite index than it was last year. Now, when we get to the second quarter, it's not going to quite be that good. So figuring out how to manage during those good times and those bad times is very important. And once again, you know, being able to stick close to your numbers and know what your numbers are is vital.
Of course, yeah, if we go back to, you know, late September, October of last year, there were a lot of dealers selling lumber that they had purchased in July, August at below cost.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
We have, speaking to one of our clients, and of course, as you know, Craig, we now have the real-time price integration from builder to dealer, or dealer to builder, should I say, and dealer to supplier now. This is a very relevant conversation we're having every day. And one of our customers said to me last week that in 2022, they are processing more price changes per month than they did in the entire year of 2019.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's getting more baked into the process. You know, when I talk to remodelers and builders, you know, you're getting much more into a time and materials type of contractual relationship these days, in which you don't price things until you don't tell people what your price is until you find out what the price is that day. I just was reading another story that John McManus, who was, you know, really, really good on the housing industry, was quoting one guy as saying that builders, it used to be that even before they put anything into the ground, they'd already sold the house. Now they're much, much more likely to sell the house far closer to completion than they were, because they'll have a better idea of what their prices were, and then they can price accordingly. So you're finding that compression going on, and it's getting it's going to keep going, because this volatility is going to keep going for a while.
Well, I think that was the central point that our client was making around the frequency and velocity of these price changes, because you know, at Build Exact, our view is, you know, from the manufacturer all the way to the homeowner. But even within a dealer organization, just having pricing fidelity from your last supplier invoice to your point of sale is a big enough challenge. And we talked about all these wonderful top line growths, but if margin management is a problem because you don't know where in your organization the price levels are, it gets very noisy very quickly. If you're doing manual quote fallout, for example, or as soon as you get outside of that manual processes, are struggling with this amount of price changes to actually keep up and protect that margin in each line item.
Yeah, how many sales reps have you seen around the country who keep all of their prices, all of their notes in some sort of volume, some sort of 3-ring binder or something like that. And they can't even remember what happened 5 pages before.
Yeah.
So to be able to even have that kind of a record, I think matters a lot.
Now, in the C150 report, you explored these areas and these pain points with the industry. Anything around technology that you feel would be valuable to the listeners today?
Well, if you were asking earlier, what's going to last? What's going to hang in there for years to come? And e-commerce is definitely going to keep growing. There has been this interesting progression over time. If you start looking at, for example, the percentage of dealers who offered the ability to see your bills online. If it was 45% last year, it's like 72% this year. But then the next thing coming up is the ability to pay your bills on time or online. Well, that might have been 30, now it's 40%, whatever the numbers are, and I give them in the report. After that becomes BOPIS, the ability to buy online and pick up in the store, and pay for it. So the ability to pay for your not just pay your bill, but pay for that particular purchase. And then after that comes warehouse management and the ability to know if a product is in stock. And this is going to be a really vital next stage, because if you talk to groups like the Home Innovation Research Institute, and some of the research they've done of builders, and they've said, what's the most likely thing that you picked up as a habit during COVID and you're going to continue? It's shopping around. Mm-hmm. It's looking around to see, because you can't always tell if the product is there. And so being able to say, I know what your favorite product is, and we've got this much in stock, I think it's going to be a real great development, especially if you can also tell them what the price of that product is at the time. Well,
of course, in being able to provide that information in a timely manner also matters, right? If it takes 3 days, or if it takes 6 internal communications inside your own organization just to get to that point, then it's one thing having the information, but making sure the information is accessible to the builder, which kind of goes to a question that we have from Ken in our audience. What would you say that dealers want builders to know mostly that can impact product availability?
Well, I think that probably the number one thing right now is delivery times and availability, because the number of dealers who told me that they've increased dramatically the percentage of time that they're just devoting to their sales reps, just giving updates on when products will arrive, as well as advice on when you should start ordering this product, has risen dramatically, to the point where I can't tell you how many dealers I've talked to who said, we just aren't even taking any new customers. Mm-hmm. A, because we don't know if we can serve them, but B, we don't have time to serve them. And that's a cliff that we're going to be falling off pretty soon if we don't watch out. So first, availability of the product is there. Second is, what's the price going to be when it gets there? Mm-hmm. So if you can use technology or other things to at least get a sense of where you think prices are heading. My advice, sir, is that if you're going to be buying these windows, you can expect that probably between now and then, the price is going to be 5% higher than it is right now. At least they can put that in their budget. Yeah. Third is when it comes to product availability, is also making sure that they're aware that other products are available. Well, sir, I know that you wanted this product. We've got another product that we think will do the job just fine for you, especially given the price of the house you're planning to sell. We recommend you consider this product. You haven't used it before.
That's a very, very important point. Of course, in the world, if I'm a sales rep for a dealer, mostly I know what they're asking me to quote on. That's about as much visibility as I have. A specific list of items. I don't really know much else. I don't know what the total build is comprised. I don't know what other projects are in the builder's pipeline. I just know what I'm being asked.
Yeah.
The interesting thing when you turn the table and going to Ken's question here,
Yeah.
The builder also doesn't know all the range that the dealer offers. It's interesting, these relationships can, of course, we know that builders are using an average of 4 suppliers to complete every job, and they're very narrow in the selection that they're working with out of habit, perhaps, or for other reasons with that supplier. Quite often they just don't know. And we have an integration case study where we have a dealer who's been integrated now for just coming up to 12 months. 200 builders are integrated using our collaborative tool, and they've had a $5,000 per month top line increase in revenue across average across those 200 builders. It's $1 million a month. And when we're sitting there and understanding why, what happened, did those builders all of a sudden get more work? No, they actually just had greater visibility of the inventory that the dealer had available. So this clarity between the two groups, I think, is really, really a critical piece to that question that Ken asks. What do you got? When can I have it? How much will it cost?
Right. I also would bring up that when we talk about communication, I think language issues also figure in there too. One of the great things about technology is that it sometimes makes communications easier in another language because you can see it and read it rather than hear it over the telephone, over a scratchy telephone call. And
no
so,
question. Or as some would say, math is the great universal language, right? When you can get someone's description of a product down to an item number, and that can flow up and down the vertical, then you have that kind of clarity. I think the other point that you're touching on that's really valuable to think about for a minute is time. For all the dealers that are listening here, most of you would use gross margin return on inventory as one of your primary KPIs. And if you've ever done sensitivity analysis to see what happens when the inventory stays in your system an extra week, you'll know how important time is. Well, for the builder, it's exactly the same. Once a builder has started the project, time becomes their enemy. And so it's not just what you have, it's not just delivery, but it's also time it takes to actually make the transaction. How quickly can decisions be made, and how quickly can we move forward to get these projects complete? Yeah,
I fortunately or unfortunately remember back in the days of Jimmy Carter's oil shortages and price increases, and getting a 13% mortgage on my first house in Washington, D.C. with an adjustable rate mortgage. And a lot of people who are in the business today never lived through that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there used to be a phrase that was imprinted on everybody's mind, which was the time value of money.
Yeah.
And I think the time value of money actually was one of the reasons why they started the practice at dealers of giving you a discount if you pay by the 10th. Mm-hmm. Because you wanted to get that money in as fast as you could. And then for the longest time in a low interest rate environment, it made no sense at all. But now being aware of how fast you can slosh money through your system and how efficiently is a big thing. And we've got much, much better ways now than giving a discount if you pay by the 10th. Having electronic payment systems, not even having to bill people once a month, just, bill them on a different cycle. Those are all new things and wonderful things that we can do now.
When a really, really good point. I've had colleagues of mine say, if I don't get that money in 90 days, then it wasn't worth writing the business in the first place. All right, it starts to matter. One of my questions I wanted to ask you was just that around the Fed, around policy. Right now, interest rates, I think, where 30-year fixed is now north of 5%, I believe.
Yes, yes, it is.
Do you have a view?
5.52 according to yesterday's Mortgage News Daily. for a 30-year fixed, which is why I'm sure everyone's going to start going for the ARM, which is the adjustable rate mortgage, 5 years fixed at 4.65. You know, so yeah, we're going to have a world in which adjustable rate mortgages are probably going to keep us going for a while. It's one of the reasons actually why, while a lot of people are worried about interest rates going up, when it comes to monthly payments, if you have an ARM, that makes the pain a little less and thus keeps the demand a little higher and makes things a little more affordable.
And does the HELOC or does the lower cost of equity financing, because one thing that we do have is high valuations now, does this also address mobility in the decision to stay in place and remodel versus, you know, moving to a new location? Does that also give us any insight into remodeling versus new construction?
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. If you're a Californian and you want to move to Idaho, you like it because you can sell your house and, you know, and then move to move to what has been until recently probably a cheaper state. But with regard to other people, you know, I remember once there was a man from the Urban Land Institute who said, everybody thinks the most powerful force on earth is gravity. You know, it's electricity or whatever. He said, it's not. The most powerful force on earth is grandchildren. And the desire to stay near your kids is such a powerful force that people are more than willing, if their kids are in the neighborhood, to fix up their house and keep their house going and improve on their house. There also is interesting research going on in which there's an incredible suspicion, but we're still looking for all the solid data to prove that decks are getting bigger. We definitely know that decks are getting fancier. People are doing more things to their home than they did in the past. And so, you know, there's both an increase and an upgrade going on at the same time. And both of those bode well. Yeah, we might not have the 18% growth in remodeling spending, but if we have 15% or 14%, it's still better than last year.
Yep, and of course, reaching those remodelers and custom home builders is the challenge, right? And I saw in your report that, you know, revenue-wise, you put custom home builders and remodelers together, then the revenue contribution was north of 50% with those two groups, vis-a-vis production builders, etc.
Yeah, you know, the dealers, the most construction supply dealers are really dealing with the small builder and custom home market. They really are not. They're not selling a lot to Pulte or to DR Horton.
Which is interesting because the pain points or the way that a custom home builder or remodeler work is very different than the way a production builder works. Right?
Absolutely.
You know, if you could grossly oversimplify this, if I'm a production builder, I want to build one design and duplicate it as many times as I possibly can. The custom home builder and the remodeler, it's the inverse. Every time we start a new project, it's de novo. We're starting over again. And so the demands that they have on their suppliers and their support services is very, very different from what the production building industry would need.
I think that is true in a lot of ways. But I would say that if you're doing a kitchen and bath job, or you're building a pergola, or you're building a porch, you're not doing exactly the same thing over and over again, but you're similar, you're cousins. So to have a system in place where you can at least have a template that you can start with is a great way to work with. You know, I just had my remodeler who built the deck on our roof. We had in because we need to redo the roof and we've got to take down the deck. And he is Marcelo Palma is actually a Build Exact customer, and he was talking to me about to have those templates in place every house in DC is different, but every house still has just, enough qualities that he knows that, he's going to need drywall on the job. He's going to need fasteners on the job. He's going to need such and such on the job. So he's at least got something he can start with. And it's not taking a template and punching it out like you're punching out iPads, but it is something that if you have the ability to take something that's core and just tweak it a little bit left and right, that saves you an enormous amount of time than having to start from scratch.
Yes, and a lot of our dealer clients are recognizing the power of that also. A lot of dealer clients are actually with an eye out to their own considerations, their own range, their own offer, what they want to sell. They're building templates and build assemblies for their builders. So it's another service that they're able to provide to the builders. It's a pretty significant value to the builder. And of course, the dealer in exchange gets to get some control over what inventory is going out the door. And I want to lead into a question. Greg Brooks some months ago said, if you have lumber yard in your name, you should change it to something else, because we actually should be thinking about being in the construction services business now. Did you?
I agree.
Doing the report, what came up around the way that dealers are changing or adapting? What's happening out there in the field in your conversations in terms of new ways of meeting the market opportunity?
Well, I'll start with one that's a little bit older, but it was a surprise for me. I knew that 85% of the people who respond to the Construction Supply 150 do takeoffs and do designs, but I was surprised that 25% of the respondents said they'll design a house for you. And so, in other words, the consulting and the operations that they do go way, way beyond just taking an actual drawing and coming up with a bill of sale. They're working far, far more on that. Half of them were offering kitchen designs, but the 25% doing a whole house sort of blew my mind.
Right.
And that's an example in my mind of how construction services are changing now. And even a bigger one, I suppose you could say financially, has to do with something I did for the first time when I looked at what Builders First Source refers to as value-added products. Now, they think of it in two different ways. One is they've got this pre-cut lumber package they put out called Ready Frame. They build trusses, they do wall panels. And then they also regard value-added products as being things like having a door shop, a door hanging shop, or millwork and the like. And by the time they get done, something like 43% of all their revenue, they say, comes from value-added products. So I was wondering, we never really in the past, neither here nor at the Pro Sales 100, asked that question. So I tried to figure this out a little bit. And when I did, I found out that of the people who responded, it was a significant part of their revenue. Something like 35-40% of their revenue came from value-added products. And the truth is that for an enormous number of construction supply lumber yards in the country, they are practically builders on their own. By providing all these components that they were putting in place. And so I think that that's a significant trend that is going to continue beyond trusses, beyond roof trusses, into floor trusses, into wall panels, some component work, things like that. Certainly doing, the other one is something like 35% of them or more install things. And I was amazed at the things they install, beyond fireplaces and framing and all sorts of other services. So, is a lumber yard? Is it just simply a person who sells stuff? Well, there are a significant number of people in the Construction Supply 150 who do that. There's, I think about a third of them or more were in that group. what do they figure financially in terms of revenue? They're only 1.7% of the $373 billion worth of sales that I counted up. You know, it's the much bigger group was the lumber yards with manufacturing. So long-winded answer, but I hope that helps.
You did separate out a lot of KPIs and created that distinction between the two groups, with and without manufacturing. Right?
Yeah, yeah. About 47% of them manufacture components, most popular trusses, doors, wall panels, no surprise there. 43% of them install things.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're on the job site. 1/5 of them installed cabinets. 1/5 of them installed entry doors that did these things, you know, and some of them, there used to be this program that you heard that companies like 84 Lumber had called Trees to Keys, where they would take unfinished a lot and build the entire house, including putting the mailbox in at the curb.
Which kind of, we're going a little bit off pitch here, but you know, we've been having quite a few conversations with offsite manufacturers, right. So modular, prefab, and of course that industry recognizes that it's not black and white. There's not one and done. You're not on site or off site. And eventually, everything's ultimately a hybrid.
Oh yes,
so absolutely. You know, maybe some of the dealers that are listening might ping us while we're talking about, is there consideration being given how to bring modular construction into the dealer channel? Or is modular construction industry mostly, you know, bypassing the dealer channel? What's going on in that space? Because you know, do you go from a SIPS panel
right.
to a addition to an extension module? Is that the same linear process?
I think that there are baby steps that are taking place in those regards. Assembled railings, the building of columns, the creation of custom closets are all things that dealers are doing right now. Certainly pre-hanging the doors, pre-building the stairs.
Chair assemblies,
yeah, chair assemblies, you know, wall panels, that sort of thing. The going entirely to factory-built modular construction is going to require a change of mind of the builder, to the extent that that I don't think dealers can force that unless we have another bout in which lumber prices get so high that the builders finally, out of frustration, turn to the dealer and say, what do I do about this? I mean, I saw this happen in Indianapolis a couple of years ago. And Indianapolis is very much a wall panel truss plant, floor truss, roof truss type of market. And they finally did go to one of the major suppliers of all that stuff. And he said, I finally had my first chance to sit down with them and said, now, if you really want to change and get better, this is what you do. And some of them listened to him and said, thank you very much, and let him leave. And a few of them actually, I think, you know, sort of held on to what he was said and said they'd think about it. I don't think any of them changed. We may need $1,000 lumber again to get there. I do see a question here about investment in larger yards and warehouses. Just a very quick answer, Ken. Oh my God, yes, they are. Because they're totally filled up to the gills with inventory, special orders that they've got to hold on to, things like that. There's a guy in Charlotte, North Carolina, who just bought a 143,000 square foot facility in South Carolina, where he's going to be doing lots of stuff. Yeah, they are getting bigger. So just to quickly answer that question, back to you, sir.
Well, that kind of goes to the question beforehand around on the demand planning side of the dealerships. I'm sure the velocity and the volatility that we have in the marketplaces right now would be making demand planners go grey. What's the conversation about how to predict future demand? Are we doing anything differently?
I think that first you start with the demographics.
Mm-hmm.
Who's moving in? What type of people are they? How much money do they have? You know, what's the income like? Is Google or, you know, some other company planning to build a factory in my area? That sort of thing. Those are just core things. You know, every 100 people who move in, you probably need 30 new houses, 40 new houses,
Mm-hmm.
and the like. But I think there's sort of a sidelight to that too, which is that just because or let me start again. The sidelight to that is that who lives around you isn't your only customer base these days.
Right.
And with e-commerce making it possible to sell to people far, far away, you know, when you say, you know, what type of growth should you have? Well, it depends in part on whether you want to grow a particular subset of the construction supply business that can help you out. There's a small dealer, I think he's got maybe 4 people in his entire lumberyard in Missouri. In Iowa. I met him recently, and he is struggling because the community is not growing, but he's doing a land office business selling Milwaukee tools. And people will drive 4 or 5 hours to buy Milwaukee tools from him. So when you ask, you know, well, how big a warehouse do you need? If you look around, you would think, oh, you don't need much more than a closet. But given what he's doing and how he's selling them, he needs something much bigger. So the answer of how much do you need is based on not only where you are, but what do you want to do with your business?
We were having a chat before this webinar around sales account management in dealerships.
Oh yes,
and it's extraordinary to me that, well, maybe extraordinary is too strong a word. Probably, if we surveyed the listeners here today, they would say that less than or about 15% of all their commercial accounts are account managed. So the question, you know, and we're very interested in this because we're providing the tools to increase the number of commercial accounts that can be account managed by any given sales team. But decisions about where to send that account management team or where they go themselves, how you make a decision about how to understand what's happening in your market, I think is very important. And we recognize through our own research that there's not a lot of visibility there. So today, when a dealer gets a collaborative RFQ from a build exact builder, they see not only the RFQ, but they see all of the project activity for that builder. They see how many projects are open, what the dollar value is in the project in the total portfolio of the builder, and the intention there is if the dealer has a better understanding of what's happening in the builder population in the catchment area, they're going to make better and more efficient decisions about how to enable their sales team.
I agree with you, and I'm very interested in this subject for a similar reason, and that is that I believe that just relying on rises and falls of volatile products to make your living is a bad way to make a living. And I also believe that sometimes you can't always count on that kind of growth happening, but you can control your costs. And I believe that in some ways, getting beyond a 3% or a 4% or a 5% net profit is a practice of just slowly paring away your costs bit by bit by bit and understanding those costs. And dealers have started to do that. You know, they're treating truck turnarounds like NASCAR pit stops. They're looking more effectively at other stuff, but they haven't really looked at sales. And I think it's in part because they tend to view their salespeople as these free agents who you open up the gates every day and you let them run out and go out and catch what they can, and then they bring home rabbits and they bring home coyotes and they bring home armadillos, and that's your dinner, you know. And if they bring home a lot of coyotes or a lot of rabbits, then you've got a great dinner. And if they don't, they don't. But you never ask them, apparently, where are you hunting? How are you hunting? What's the best use of your time? And I think it's in part because these sales reps are free agents. And if you try to get them to control them, they'll say, oh, I'm not going to turn on that computer.
Yeah,
that's not my job. You know, you're getting in my way. I've when talking to dealers around the country, I've gotten the feeling more and more and more that they're starting to think about what is the best use of my sales rep's time. I was talking to one dealer in the Northeast, and he said, you know, we're making things so easy now for the customer. We've got people in the back who do the ordering for you and call you up and let you know that they're call the builder up and let them know that the product is coming, and, you know, helping arrange with the building, that the customer is coming to me and saying, why is my sales rep coming to me? What is my sales rep doing for me? You've got all these other people. The sales rep's actually a waste of my time. And his concern was the sales rep's a waste of the guy's time. And my concern is why don't you have a better sales rep?
Yeah.
Why can't you take that sales rep to the next level, to be that consultant that you mentioned, that Greg Brooks talked about, helping them solve their problems? Well, because they're used to be taking orders, you know. Interesting comment just coming in here too.
Yeah, so, from Mike, I think you're absolutely right, but I think there's another factor at play here too, is that who owns the customer?
Oh, absolutely.
And if you know, particularly in where we've got labor compression and there's not a sales rep out there, OSR out there that doesn't know it, right? And they're selling $6, $7, $8 million worth of building materials a year. Does the business really own that customer? And are there other ways to set up the sales environment that's more collaborative with the builder, so that that value proposition is more strongly tied to the enterprise?
Absolutely. There was I remember visiting, and this was long ago, Zeeland Lumber, and Herc Vandenbosch, the president, said that he always had his sales reps operate in groups of 3. And he said, the reason I do that is because, you know, one's usually better at selling and one's better at bookkeeping, and that way we get the maximum value. He said, but the other reason I do that is that in case one of them leaves, I still got 2 other people who have relationships. And that's a scary thing, you know, to think that you're once again dependent on these hunters to run out and bag the rabbits, and you don't even know where the rabbits are. I think it's your job to know where the rabbits are.
And I think that this issue that Mike raises is really important, because there's another consideration as the sales reps may be free agents, but we know from research in the industry here in North America that the average sales rep is using 1/2 of a full-time equivalent internal support person to be able to actually deliver information out into the field. So yeah, that's an average. So there is a direct cost burden to the way that they work, and in general, most dealers would admit I don't really understand the cost dynamics of my sales process. And it's something that we hear a lot of interest in exploring and getting to become more conversant in what's actually happening in that sales environment.
Yeah, because I think improvements are not going to come through, you know, big hits, but they're going to come through these little incremental gains where you either keep yourself from underpricing, or you get that little extra 0.5% that comes from doing it well. I do have one big fear as a result of all the activity that we've had. Dealers have been so busy that they're cutting off their businesses to new customers. And they're not taking on new customers largely because they can't service them if they tried. Well, the supply chain will get better. And are we going to end up with an entire group of potential customers that we would have gotten during this time, but who instead went to Home Depot, and we lost forever. And
Well,
I do worry about that.
we do know, I mean, if you think about, just to draw an analogy on the builder side, we know that pretty much anybody could pick up a hammer and go out there and get construction work right now.
Yeah.
And so what we can expect in that kind of environment is we're going to be service quality issues start arising. And when you start to hear homeowners begin to complain, they say, oh boy, I'm in a nightmare here. I've got problems here. As people who probably might not have any business being in the business, get in the business. And so the overall service proposition fails away. That's a systemic issue. I think when we look at it from a dealer point of view, it's not as if someone's going to throw a dealer yard up next door, but absolutely what it will mean is service matters. Even when you're drinking through a fire hydrant, as the market turns, that service proposition is what's going to maintain and grow market share. Absolutely.
And I think that gets down into service is a matter of figuring out how can you do as efficiently as possible the simple things so that you can use your brain to worry about the complicated things. Yeah. What if we had a world in which 75% of all refill orders came in online? How much time would the sales rep save by not having to take that down? How much time would the inside rep save by doing that? If we can get to that world, where we're much more efficient that way, I think that's going to be a great leap forward.
I think it's a fantastic point, Craig. When we're in the business of working technology, and people do have fear around technology as a big idea. Somehow, one day you're going to turn a switch on or off, and you're going to be technology focused, not people focused. But that's actually not the way that it works. Technology at its best, and we can all personally think about technology in our own lives, it really removes all those low value tasks and functions that you otherwise wouldn't want to do anyway. The calendar that helps you to look after your time. And the principle is if the technology takes care of those low value tasks, making sure you don't have quote fallout, those types of things, then that frees up time for you to be in a more productive and collaborative relationship in all aspects of your life, right? And that's the challenge, to get people to kind of just think, wow, okay, yeah, I can see how this can make us a more people-oriented business.
No, I agree. And I sometimes, that technology is almost like the weather report. Mm-hmm. The weather report does lots of simple things for you that help you in a million different ways, be it reminding you to put on the umbrella, to take the umbrella, put on the raincoat, or get the extra sweater. But as much as anything else, it tells you what's coming so that you can make plans. And having that transparency and that insight into your customers' plans, I think is similar to the weather report. It helps you respond accordingly.
Well, Craig, we have just a few minutes left, maybe 6 minutes left. To that end, thinking really about what you learned from the dealers. I mean, you've been in this business a long time, and the C150 report is enabling you to stay really contemporary and current. What would you have a concluding statement or point of view about what dealers should be thinking about today and for the next 12 to 18 months until the next C150 report comes out?
Well, I think that this is a very good time to be in the business of construction supply, assuming you really want to be in the business and are willing to do all that it takes to be in the business. I think that the demand for housing is going to be there for a long time. The demographics are with us. Compared with even 30, 40, 50 years ago in terms of in terms of how our economy operates, in terms of how technology operates. You know, we've come light years ahead. I mean, I remember when President Nixon froze wages and prices. You know, I remember when we had the kinds of crashes and problems that came because the stock market was not technologically advanced. We've gotten through a lot of that stuff. But we have, I think, what I used to sometimes call a Hot Wheels economy. When you were growing up, or when your children were growing up, you may remember Hot Wheels. You know, the great thing about Hot Wheels is you had those little orange tracks and you could put them down, and those cars could go faster and faster than anything you had before when you were trying to run it over your carpet. And the great thing about it is that you could get those cars to go really, really fast and go loop to loop, and jump over things and everything else, and they were wonderful. The trouble is that if you got the orange track off just a little bit, you got your measurements off, the car would go flying off the track and go crash into your mother's china cabinet. We're in a Hot Wheels economy now. We can do things technologically now that we never could before, and for the most part, we've got guardrails to help protect us. But if you don't watch out, you can go off the track. So it takes discipline, and it takes vision, and it takes planning to succeed. But if you can drive that car faster than you ever could before, and you've got a great vehicle. So, you know, this is a great business for people who want to be in it, and who do what's necessary.
There's an infamous McKinsey report from 2017 that looked at productivity growth since 1992 across, you know, the report. And the comment to the report was, well, there's been no productivity growth in the construction industry, and the construction industry are laggards in the adoption of technology. And of course, we would say, if you really examine that, you would look at the construction industry to be at fault there. Our point of view is actually the opposite of that. We think it's been the fault of the technology industry that hasn't really sought to understand the complexity of delivering the built environment and the pain points that are involved with that. So as a dealer listening to this, I think your affirmation to look at technology is important, but you're perfectly entitled to ask the question, does this company understand my pain points operationally? And if they can exhibit an understanding, have they provided a simple solution, or are they just adding more complexity? And I
think dealers are much more willing to demand that of their tech people. And the tech people are much more able, because of speeds of processing and ability to compute, to do things that could not be done before. We are entering a period in which the marriage of technology and sawdust is going to produce some really wonderful stuff.
On that note, once again, my friend, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for listeners. I'm sure we've got a way for you to get in touch with Craig if you have any questions, or myself likewise. And we thank everybody for their time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.